there, ref. That she got the ball.
Yes, good evening, everybody. How are we all doing, Spurs fans? We will be doing your Tuesday panel show. We will have Sam be joining us. It will be a front three tonight, and then we'll have another show lined up for you guys on Thursday because things are getting back into the swing of things. We'll be having our first preseason game of the season this Saturday. I'm looking forward to it, to be back alongside Davo for the pre-match build-up, the watch-along, all that good stuff. We'll be enjoying, the beginning of the Thomas Frank era. Of course, we've been talking about it plenty, but we actually need some evidence, to work with. We need some sort of action to unfold, and looking forward to this Saturday and looking forward to getting back into the swing of things, back into the busy schedule that is Tottenham Hotspur. For tonight, we will be talking about the Morgan Gibbs-White situation, but really not much more than that. So we're not going to try to make things up, Spurs news-wise or transfer stories-wise. We're really not going to try to make anything up. In fact, we're kind of just going to talk about how you guys feel about this Morgan Gibbs-White situation, whether you think it's going to get done eventually, whether you think it might be hindering some other moves that Spurs could have on the cards, just kind of digging deeper into the situation, trying to get some clarity on this whole fiasco, really, with Morgan Gibbs-White. As always, though, everybody, please smash the like button as you're joining us. Get into the comments, please. Let us know what you would like us to discuss. If you would want to interrupt the show at any point, welcome to do it as a super chat. It does also help support Dave and I and everything that we're doing. Thank you to all the members that I'm already seeing in the house as well. Plenty of people in here. DB's in the house. Shemtan is in the house. Derek Hutchinson, Alpesh Patel, the legend that is Alpesh, Dermatron, Rakdos Madness. Hopefully you're doing well, Alan, enjoying California. Darren Johnson, Rainman, and plenty of others that are joining us. Jason Bell as well, you absolute legend. Sam is joining us over from Spurs Related. He'll be in here in just a second or two. But Dave, that's kind of the situation tonight, is that maybe a bit of a shorter show. Some people might prefer sometimes a shorter show, but it's really just going to be Morgan Gibbs-White. We have maybe 3 to 4 questions on that. And then at the end of the show, we'll do our members' questions. So please, everybody, get into the post section of the YouTube channel, go over to the YouTube homepage, click on that post section, give us your questions that you would like us to answer at the end of the show. But yeah, Dave, maybe a shorter show for tonight and more palatable, I guess, for people. We'll just be talking about Morgan Gibbs-White. We can't make anything up at the end of the day.
No, look, at the end of the day, we're sort of debating whether we wanted to go live or not, because to be honest with you, it's been a very sort of slow news day, a very dry news day. It seems like the Morgan Gibbs-White deal is maybe holding up Spurs' transfer window to a certain degree. So not a lot happening right now. We're left in limbo. So it was debatable whether to go live or not. But we said, look, we'll go live, but, we're not going to make anything up or invent anything. We're just going to discuss maybe a little bit about what's out there and then get off, go and do something more productive for ourselves for the evening and just piss about.
And maybe salvage whatever days we have before it starts getting really hectic and busy, as you've been kind of alluding to me behind the scenes, Dave. And also, by the way, everybody, cheeky little plug, look out for 2 videos that will be coming this week. We'll be sitting down and recording 5 players that need to impress Thomas Frank, this preseason. And then also Dave will be giving you guys everything that you need to know about the preseason starting this Friday. I think we're putting that out on Friday. And then, the preseason begins on Saturday. Sam, we're about to get into the questions. Perfect timing, perfect arrival. How you doing, sir, before we get into it?
I'm well, lads. Sorry I'm late, chat. I was just, it's been a long day.
Do you know what? We'll forgive you, Sam. In fairness, I don't think you've ever shown up late, so we'll forgive you.
Yeah, this guy's the Pedro Porro of the panels. Usually, 4,000 minutes logged with us.
Probably better record showing up to this show than I do, to be honest.
He's done exceptionally. But let's get into it, everybody. Like I said, maybe a bit of a shorter show tonight, but we will be talking a lot of things about Morgan Gibbs-White. And I kind of want Dave, because he and I had a good conversation, before we recorded about this whole situation. Dave, I think, is going to give us really his thoughts on this situation and also maybe some clarity, because I actually got a lot out of when I was talking to him about this whole fiasco. If Nottingham Forest believe that Spurs have done something wrong, what would Spurs basically have to have done, Dave, to satisfy Forest in letting Morgan Gibbs-White go? Because the news that's come out, is that they actually haven't necessarily filed a complaint yet with the Premier League, but they're also not willing to let Morgan Gibbs-White go. So we're in this stalemate kind of situation. So what would Spurs, technically, the first question is, what would Spurs had to have done in order to satisfy basically Nottingham Forest?
Well, look, first of all, I think it's important to understand how a release clause enters a player's contract in the first place. Yeah. Usually, if you're a player and you believe in your ability and you see the club you're moving to as a stepping stone, you and your agent will put into your contract a certain amount that if any club comes in with that valuation or above, it has to be accepted and you can move on. And the reason why a player would do that is so that he doesn't get bogged down at a football club. For instance, the way Harry Kane was tied down at Tottenham, no one could really get him out until Kane sort of forced the situation by running down his contract. So in order to prevent that, that's why players would put a release clause in their contract. Now, as far as I'm aware of it, that it was Forrest, I think, probably said to him, we're okay with the release clause, but only we're supposed to know about this. No one else knows about this. Now, obviously, somehow Spurs have found out about it. Now, how did Spurs find out about it? Look, there's many different ways. It could have been through a player. It's well known in football and circles that a manager could instruct the player, sound them out, see what the interest is like. It could be through people meeting up with him and England duty. It could be even someone like Thomas Frank, who was well aware of it when he was at Brentford. They just didn't have the money to trigger it and has alerted Tottenham to it. It could be any one of those scenarios. However, where Malinakis is throwing his toys out the pram and throwing the baby out with the bathwater this time is the fact that he feels blindsided. He wants to know how Tottenham knew about it. And he's annoyed because as soon as it was triggered, Morgan Gibbs-White was on his way to Tottenham to do a medical the next day. So usually when you trigger a release clause, what you're supposed to do is actually go to that club, put in the bid. If it's over the release clause, then obviously, if the club are pissing about, the player will go, well, don't forget this legal binding agreement that I've signed. You have to accept it. And then they go and speak to the club. However, where Malinakis is pissed off, it seems like personal terms were done before Tottenham even put in the bid and triggered that release clause that he had already accepted to sign a certain wage, a certain end to contract at Tottenham Hotspur. So where Malinakis is coming from Nottingham Forest, is he's sitting there going, well, if this was confidential, how do Tottenham know about this? Now, in order for him to be able to bring the case, to court or whatever else, he's going to have proof. They're not going to find Tottenham guilty without having proof. If there's no pictures of the meeting, if there's no messages, if there's no, if he can't get his hands on the minutes taken from the meetings and all that sort of stuff, then he has no case. There's no proof there to it whatsoever. And at the end of the day, to be quite frank, players have been tapped up long before, they start negotiating with clubs. Nowadays, in the old days, it used to be out of respect. The owners used to go to each other and then go and speak to the player or whatever, But that's changed down the line. Clubs no longer go to the club first anymore. They always go to the agent or someone in the player's camp, or even gauge interest from the player, find out if there's interest there first, and then they will go after and pursue that target. The clubs don't want to be pissing about trying to negotiate with a club for 3 or 4 weeks, or especially in Tottenham's case, and then find out the player doesn't want to move because you've just wasted half of your summer transfer window. So where we're at right now is, I think Malinakis is stalling to try and find proof. But at the end of the day, it's a legal binding agreement. If Spurs triggered it, I'm pretty sure this one will happen. Unless they pull out a clause from 100 years ago that everyone's forgotten about, I don't see how this isn't going to go ahead. And from my understanding, they've been trying to renew Gibbs-White's contract all season long, and he's refused all season long. He's sort of shown his cards that he wants to get out of Forest. He wants to take that next step. I also think Malinakis is probably butthurt in that regard, and he's kicking up. But for me, look, Tottenham obviously went and tapped the player up first, but there's no proof. So just send Morgan Gibbs-White on his way. And at the end of the day, it's only going to tarnish Forest, because if they're looking at any other player of Morgan Gibbs-White ability and trying to bring them in, the first thing they're going to do is go, well, hang on, look how hard it was for Morgan Gibbs-White to get out of there, even though they triggered a release clause that's in the contract. Why would I make that move? So it's going to make it harder for Nottingham Forest to sign players now of a certain caliber moving forward that aren't just looking to make the Premier League jump. So it's going to make it harder on themselves. Morgan Gibbs-White, I don't think, comes out with any problems out of it. Tottenham come out with no problems. It's all just this guy slowing it up for no reason. But for me, I don't see why this wouldn't go ahead. There's no proof of tapping up.
I want to follow you up, though, Dave, because Tango Ben Al-Sheed has brought up a comment here that was exactly my other question on this. So I'm actually glad that we're kind of on the same boat here, Tango. He's saying release clauses are not confidential. That defeats the whole point of a release clause. Dave, that was kind of my other question was, if Morgan Gibbs-White does have a release clause, why is it that no one was allowed to know about it? Like, what's the point of having a release clause if the club isn't allowed to know that it even exists in the first place? Like, why would you have basically a secret release clause? Normally, you would think that, the release clauses are kind of well known, to the clubs around the league.
In Spain, it works like that. They put on these astronomical release clauses in all the players' contracts they sign. In Spain, it works like that. And it's public knowledge to everybody, but no one ever has the money to really go and trigger them. They're so unrealistic a lot of the times.
Or Eze had one, though, too, right? Like that most
Yeah,
of the
Eze
league
has
knows
one,
about.
but it all depends how it was negotiated. Sometimes the clubs, like someone like Forest, I would argue, they wouldn't have wanted Morgan Gibbs-White to have a release clause in his contract because they want to be in control of the valuation they can sell the player for. So it could be a case where Forest have turned around and said, look, we'll let you have the release clause as long as it means confidential between us and you. That's the only guessing I can have on that. Apart from that, yes, usually release clauses are well known. But like I said, teams like Forest won't want release clauses in their players' contracts because they want to dictate the value they sell them at.
Yeah. It seems like, that could be the case, that it's a confidential release clause. But Sam, I mean, is that where you're also a bit confused like me, where, normally we kind of know that there is a release clause, that you can hit. But it seems like in Gibbs-White's situation, someone somehow found out about it and it might have been leaked. So, what do you make of the fact that it's a confidential release clause that no one was supposed to know about? So who do you think is in the wrong then? Was it Gibbs-White's agents? Is it Tottenham that maybe did a little bit too much tapping up? Or is it simply just Nottingham Forest not willing to let him go? What do you think who's at fault here, do you think?
Well, see, the fault thing is interesting because ultimately, how can Spurs get in trouble with it if basically every transfer that happens, we hear that personal terms are done and they're just waiting on the clubs to agree a deal, right? So I'm not really sure.
is famous for them words, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not really sure how that kind of comes into the equation. And then also, I was saying this on the last stream I was on.
Big up Paris.
It's not like Tottenham forced Morgan Gibbs-White or the agent or one of the family members or someone involved to tell them about this contract option, right? This was information that was offered to them.
Yeah, obviously.
Tottenham haven't signed an NDA, so they're at no, they know this information. They're at no, there's no reason for them to have to act like they don't know it. And I've seen people saying that potentially there was a chance for Spurs and Nottingham Forest. They sat down and they tried to come to an amicable agreement, which maybe we offered another couple million and they wanted another 5-6 million, and ultimately we've just said no, and we'll just pay the legal fees that will not reach 5 or 6 million, hopefully, and we'll just get them for what we originally agreed on. So for me, it's kind of interesting, and in the language that was used on some of the leaks from Marinakis is it said that he's willing to lose a significant amount of money, right? To keep Morgan Gibbs-White. So for me, I actually think that doesn't show a position of power. Like maybe he might be leaking that information to let people know that. I think that comes across as a bit of a weakness, because for me, it's a weakness of the case. And as you said, Jack, earlier on about them not putting they haven't actually submitted their legal, whatever it is that they submit. It's not actually been lodged yet. So why has it taken so long? Is this them trying to basically, they don't have the strongest case. They might have a case. I'm not saying they haven't got a case. There's going to be a case in all of these things, right? But he's saying, I'm going to lose all this money because he's willing to basically get himself the best lawyer to give himself every chance of winning the battle, rather than thinking that he's strong enough to get a top lawyer and then just win the case based on merit. So ultimately for me, I think that this transfer will happen as long as Spurs don't lose interest. I think that they'll shelve it for a bit and wait till it kind of dies down, and then we'll go and do it, basically. So I don't think they can stop it. Ultimately, they can put roadblocks in the way, but ultimately, I think we'll do it.
Yeah, Q7 even had a good comment saying, "What's good, lads? It's the agent's fault for telling us when we inquired, in my eyes. Forest just being pricks, but I feel the longer it goes on, we may pull out, which is what Forest want." I think Sam was kind of alluding to that as well, Q7 there, that maybe what Forest are going to try to do is just bury us in paper, bury us in legal trouble and all that stuff to basically just annoy us to death so that eventually we do pull out. Good to see Lazy 8. Nick, how we doing, sir? Saying apparently it was supposed to be a relegation scenario release clause that would only be made known in that event. It still sounds dodgy, though. DB saying, for me, we have to move on. This Forest guy will just not back down. So we have to be seen to, or literally just move on from here. Well, it seems like DB doesn't want to get into this legal battle with Marianakis. Phil Coy saying, from what I've read, is that we approached his agent before consulting Forest about a release clause. The only way this deal goes through is if Morgan Gibbs-White puts in a transfer request and we increase the fee. Dave, who's at fault here? Is it Morgan Gibbs-White's agents? Is it Tottenham for tapping up and maybe asking maybe too many, dangerous questions about his contract situation? Or is it just Forest just kind of just being, dicks here?
It's just Forest being dicks, Jack. That's all it is. Like, Tottenham aren't at fault. We want a player. We've gone after him, triggered the release clause, agreed a deal, let him come and do his medical.
The agents didn't leak any information they weren't supposed to? You don't
even
think?
If they did, it's not Tottenham's fault, is it? And even if they did, I don't care. At the end of the day, Morgan Gibbs-White wants to come to Tottenham. He's going to help improve our fortunes on the pitch. I really like him. Look, from Forest's point of view, they really don't want to lose the guy. He was the catalyst in that midfield who set off the likes of Alanga, Adai, helping contribute goals as well, along with assists, helping Chris Wood with his goal tally and that as well. He's a crucial part of what they're trying to do. And this is a guy that was key to Nuno at Wolves. And also, when he moved to Forest, he doesn't want to lose this guy. This is what they want to build their team around. That's why they're showing it. But how dare he comes after moaning about Tottenham doing wrong? This is a guy that broke financial fair play to keep Forest in the Premier League. So if he wants to talk about fairness, they should be back down in the Championship because if they spent the appropriate money at the time and not gone overboard. So how dare this fucker sits there and says, oh, Tottenham's in the wrong, foul play, this, that, and the other, when you broke I don't know how many fucking rules, and not just in England, by the way, but also other clubs he owns in other leagues as well. He's broken rules. So this guy to be screaming fair play is like calling the pot and the kettle black. You know what I mean? It's absolutely ridiculous.
I love Rain Man saying that Morgan Gibbs-White might have to sue Marianakis. Now that would be it's like a suance, it's just multiple suings going on at the same time. Ed Sweeting saying the problem for Marianakis is that Tottenham are not responsible for the breach of the NDA on the release clause. If we became aware of the release clause, that is not any breach of any contract. Good to see you, Ed Sweeting. Good to see you, Mary W. We also have Eugene joining us in the house. Everyone's Lily White's in here. Future's bright. Future's Lily White. And then we also have a super chat coming in from Artist 2, who also has a special question for us at the end of the show, saying, what's pissing me off right now? Why aren't we delegating this someone else and focusing on bringing in players? It's confirmed we want 2 more players. Well, maybe he's doing a good job here of actually, again, people are doing the hosting job for me here. So well done, Artist T. Well done to Tango Ben Al-Shid. Another question that we have for you guys, Sam and Dave, was, could this complicated situation with Nottingham Forest and Gibbs-White right now potentially be stalling or delaying any other deals that we have going on or planning to make? We're hearing news about bringing in a number 6. Potentially, we want to still bring in, you would hope, another left-sided defender. Could this whole fiasco with Morgan Gibbs-White, the agents, the suing, the lawyers, could that be delaying, any other moves that we're trying to get done? Go to you, Sam.
I personally don't think so. I think that the fact that Kudus and Gibbs-White came literally out of thin air within the space of a week, right? I think that just shows you they are spinning plates in the back, as they like to say, right? Out of public eye, but there are deals that are trying to be worked. And I think that, we, especially with this Morgan Gibbs-White one, we have seen our club's desire. If a deal is there to be done, they will do that deal. You know what I mean? If it suits them, they will do it. So if an opportunity comes up to sign a left back, for example, or to sign an alternative striking option up front, then I can see them doing it. I think that ultimately there will be a delegation, because there's only so far that the 2 clubs can negotiate. And if you're believing what we're reading at the moment is that the negotiation is done now, and now it's the legal point, then what is there for people like Vinay to do in terms of trying to push the deal through, or Lang or Paratici? they have to wait for the legal proceedings now. So someone else is dealing with it. They might be, checking in from time to time and keeping tabs on everything that's going on. But ultimately, I think that it's taken out of their hands, even if they weren't planning on delegating it. They have to wait until these proceedings are over. And I think that ultimately this is one that, although I think it's going to happen, I think it's going to happen basically once the season's pretty much either about to start or has already started and deadline day comes around. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next month or so. But I think ultimately it is going to have to be shelved, and they've got no choice in the matter. So if other deals come up, we will be taking them, I believe.
I mean, Dave, do you think we could be delegating this now to someone else just to handle the situation? You'd hope that's the case.
Yeah, look, the thing is, a lot of these billionaires, they're well able to take on multiple things every single day and delegate things to other people. It's why they have so much money, because they could be investing in so many different things to make that sort of money. So, there will be some, like Sam says, this will be handed over to lawyers now and all, waiting for legal proceedings. I reckon Marinakis is probably trying to contact Tottenham, getting extra money out of them. I reckon no one at Tottenham's probably picking up the phone to the fucker. Look, Daniel Levy ain't going to give over any extra. I'll be very surprised if he budges off that 60 million. He is known as a tight ass, so I'll be very surprised. And he's known as wanting to win negotiations, so I'll be very, very surprised if he hands over any extra money to get this deal done quick, which means this is going to rumble on. But it then puts Tottenham in a position, though, to be fair, because it will affect your incomings and your outgoings. And the reason why is, Morgan Gibbs-White comes in as a midfielder. You can't really let another midfielder go until you have another one in the door. So that maybe then stalls Basuma maybe exiting this football club, for instance. Also, 60 million, and you're probably talking about large enough wages for Morgan Gibbs-White. Yeah. Tottenham can't just go and allocate that to somebody else, because it could come a point, if Tottenham do that, then all of a sudden Marinakis turns around and goes, no, he can go now, find that money, pay him his wages, and then all of a sudden Tottenham are left with something that they didn't budget for. So I think it does slow our whole market down. Look, you've seen it the last 2-3 days. It's come to an absolute standstill, Jack. And I think in regard, I think it will have a knock-on effect, because unless we have plans to go and sanction more money on another midfielder anyway, and I'm talking about large amounts of money, well, then Tottenham ain't going to budge and go after somebody else in a Morgan Gibbs-White role if there's a chance that this could get done before the end of the window, or the Premier League sanction saying, no, it's legally binding, he's got to go. Then all of a sudden, Tottenham have to pay over that cash and find that. That'll knock on your January window, your next summer's window, because that'll come out of that budget. So this is stalling our market to a degree, yeah.
I mean, what do you make of DB's comment, which I think is kind of a bit of an answer to Artist T's, about shouldn't we just, let someone delegate, to handle this problem, but then, we still have other targets to go after. DB kind of pointing out that Spurs might also still have to consider backups to Gibbs-White. Do they just hold out, make sure that they get Gibbs-White over the line, or do they have to start thinking about alternatives to that signing of a Gibbs-White? Do they start looking at other number 10s around Europe?
I think smartly you would be looking at, or you would have other targets already lined up if you can't get Morgan Gibbs-White. But are they going to cost more money, which then has a knock-on effect to the next guy you're going to bring in the door, because that'll take out the budget you had planned for that and stuff like that. Yeah. You got to remember, if anyone goes and watches all these docu-series from football clubs, Sunderland Till I Die, the Wrexham one, Man City's, Tottenham's, and everything else, you get and Newcastle, you get a glimpse into, how they operate in the transfer market. It's only a brief glimpse, but it's all budgeted. This is what we've got ring fenced for this player, and this is what we got ring fenced for this player, and stuff like that. So it will have a knock-on effect.
What would you do, Sam? Would you start to look at other targets potentially? Some people in the chat are thinking that we should. Do you just hold out for Gibbs-White, make sure that that's the one that you get over the line, since that was clearly the guy that we're willing to pay 60 million pounds up front for? What would you do if you were in Spurs' situation? Would you get Gibbs-White deal done no matter what, or would you start to think about maybe potential alternatives?
Well, I mean, they kind of have already, in my opinion, Gibbs-White became the alternative to Eze. I know that ultimately Eze plays more on the wing, but Eze is an attacking midfield option that we were looking at. And I think that the deal was hard to do, so they pivoted away to an easier deal for obviously a younger player who could still reach the levels that Eze's reaching and potentially better. So, I think that we were linked to a lot of these kind of players. I know that a lot of them were kind of wingers, but most of the wingers we were linked to could also play inside. play a bit more of that attacking mid. So I wonder, we've seen links to players like Xavi Simons, although I just feel like that's not going to happen. But I think that they will have been doing due diligence on attacking mids anyway when they were looking at these players before. So I think that ultimately they'll be sounding out other deals whilst this kind of bubbles in the background, this whole legal proceedings. And then I guess Gibbs-White's the one that they've settled on, and I guess Frank would have been drafting up.
I think Frank wanted him at
him.
Brentford as well, though.
Yeah,
exactly.
So he's a player. He's a player that Frank obviously has ideas for. So I think that ultimately they would want to provide Frank that backing, especially to show not just Frank, but to show the fans this is the player the manager wanted. Look, he wanted him at his last club. We've brought him here now. And he's a top player who's probably going to be an England player consistently going forward. So I think ultimately you've got to just if Frank wants him, then Frank will get him.
Yeah. SOF has brought up some good comments here saying, what if Forest decide to keep Morgan Gibbs-White until the last day of the window? Would you be willing to wait that long? Spurs don't seem to be doing any other deals while waiting for the resolution. I think we hope that they are going to do other deals, but that's the big question is if Morgan Gibbs-White is the one they want, how long are they willing to wait? How much of this crazy situation are they willing to put up with? And he's saying, I think we need Morgan Gibbs-White on that plane next week. He's needed for that Super Cup with Madison and Kulusevski both unavailable. Dave, that's a fair point, right? We do need probably someone to be available in that midfield that's creative type presence. Jamie Donnelly's, is technically still around. We do have Mohamed Kudus through the door, but be nice if Morgan Gibbs-White was already in that lily white shirt, so that we could have him available for the Super Cup.
No, 100%. Look, at the end of the day, Madison and Kulu both finished the season with injuries as well. So, it's going to cause us a problem. And I think there is an opportunity there for Morgan Gibbs-White or even potentially a Donnelly. But Donnelly has to come in and hit the ground running and produce magic from the very off. And, seize that opportunity. And even then, it might not be enough for him to stick around. Look, I think with bringing in Morgan Gibbs-White, I think the long-term plan is I have a sneaky suspicion you might see Kulu push back out wide. Yeah. And Madison and Morgan Gibbs-White fighting it out then for that number 10. But look, ideally, I would like him in as soon as possible. I'd like to see him in the friendly on Saturday, if not the Luton game, before we fly out to preseason tour out in Korea and out in Hong Kong. But at the end of the day, you've got two really stubborn people. Daniel Levy, when he's his backup, he won't back down. He wants to win. And this guy, Marinakis, is another one who, when you get his backup, they want to win. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this drag on. At the end of the day, it's not going to be good for the Premier League. It's not going to be good for Forest. People say it look bad on Tottenham. It won't look bad on Tottenham. At the end of the day, Tottenham have triggered a release clause. Release clause is there for a reason. We've done nothing wrong in that regard. So I would just hope that the Premier League start. I don't understand why the Premier League haven't already sort of delegated people to look at this and get this resolved quickly as possible, because this just looks stupid on the Premier League moving forward. That, what are release clauses then? Ones that don't have to be honoured, or if a club just wants to piss about, leave it, go to the very last, day of the season and all. The Premier League have to fucking get a handle on this very, very quickly.
Well, knowing how
that's what Spurs are hoping for, by the way. That's what Spurs are hoping for, that the Premier League get a handle on this quickly and rule in their favour.
Knowing the Premier League, it's probably going to be a million committees and a million subcommittees and then subcommittees to the committees to try to get the whole thing done. A lot of yellow tape and red tape. Terry Wright saying, was Paratici maybe behind the shady deal? The Don probably looking at another band.
This one I don't understand when it comes to Paratici deal. I don't understand the whole Paratici thing. Tottenham knew Paratici's ban was up and he could start operating in the market as soon as 1st of July came around. Why on earth did they offer him an advisory contract that runs until August, or is it until the end of August, and then put him back in that role? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. But even now he's in an advisory role. Technically, he can conduct and go and speak to clubs and all that sort of stuff now because the ban is lifted. It's really hard to know. I don't think we'll know how and who's conducted this transfer window until the end of it, to be honest with you. Right now, it's really hard to know who's conducting it and what's going on. What I will say is, if this is Johan Lang and his directive and he's conducted this, I will change my opinion on him and give him credit.
Yeah, for sure. Also, just by the way, everybody, we have, it looks like, close to 800, almost 900 people actually watching on Twitter as well as on on YouTube at the minute.
Smash the like.
If you're on X or on Twitter at the moment, feel free to follow us over to YouTube, get involved in the chat. Also, do retweet this out to other people. If you're watching along in YouTube, about 400 watching in YouTube, smash a like button for us and get into the comments. If you didn't hear my intro, we're basically just going to get some clarity, get our frustrations out, just get our sort of minds somewhat, situated on this Gibbs-White fiasco. And then that's pretty much all that we have in store for you guys, because we don't really want to tread on the show that we have for Thursday evening. We're going to start to get into the mindset of the first preseason game, questions about Thomas Frank's, formation, players that we want to see be given a chance this preseason. We'll probably maybe kind of chime up again, that conversation about guys you might give another shot to, or guys that you think need to take advantage of, this preseason, all the sort of types of questions we're going to save for Thursday. Tonight's going to be a bit more just Morgan Gibbs-White related, but there hasn't really been a whole lot other than that that's really come out today. So as Dave and I have mentioned before, we don't try to make up news or make up, different transfer stories or anything like that. We're just going to talk about what's technically available to us. And we're not going to tread on what we have for Thursday night. But one of the last questions that we have, Sam, is some fans seem to be very confident that this Gibbs-White deal will eventually be done at some point. Other fans are less confident and have some reservations about this deal getting done. Where do you stand? Is the deal going to get done if you had to put your money in one camp or the other, or do you think there's a chance it doesn't get done?
I just think that it's so Tottenham, right? That the one time we beg them every window, pay the release clause, pay the release clause, pay the release clause. They don't do it. They finally do it. We're all like over the moon. And no, suddenly it's like, no, you can't have him. You've paid the release clause, but you did it wrong. So look, ultimately, I think that as I said, I think it will happen, because I think that Tottenham will argue we've done nothing wrong. We've not forced anyone to do anything. So the integrity of the deal is not affected, in my opinion. The integrity comes where between the player and the agent and Nottingham Forest, because that's where the breach has happened, right? Even if neither of those parties directly told Spurs, but let's say that Morgan Gibbs-White told his auntie, who told someone who ended up knowing Daniel Levy. You know what I mean? It's like a game of Chinese whispers where 60 million somehow ended up being the offer. So I think that, look, maybe this saga will drag on post the transfer window, and it will be between Morgan Gibbs-White and the club, basically, rather than Spurs and Nottingham Forest. And I think that ultimately Marinakis is just pissed off that his little ploy to keep this secret release clause, hidden has failed. And now he's going to be losing probably his top asset for an undervalue, in his opinion. Although when I look at it, I'm not sure that it is an undervalue, because when I look at players of a similar age and a similar profile, similar nationality, they're all going from between 55 at the low end to 75 at the high end. So ultimately, I don't really understand. 60 million is a fair value, in my opinion, for Gibbs-White. And if he stays there, then you've got an unhappy player. Maybe he's not the kind of player that throws his toys out the pram, but he's got 2 years left, as I saw a Nottingham Forest fan. I think his name was Callum in the chat, was saying he's got 2 years left. So if he doesn't sign, then you potentially.
Oh, is it me?
No, I'm
okay. Maybe Sam will come back in just a sec. I hope I'm not speaking over him. It probably am, the way that sometimes the internet lags out like that. But he made a good point there, Dave. Just wanted to touch on that, and you've mentioned this to me even in this show, as well as behind the camera, that I wonder if it's also just Marinakis kind of just having a bit of a toys out the pram situation, where he wanted to sign Gibbs-White to another deal that didn't include a release clause. Morgan Gibbs-White was unwilling to sign that contract. Now that the release clause has been triggered, it's just gone the way that Marinakis never would have wanted it to go. And he's sort of a guy that isn't just going to go down lightly. He's going to make it, a tough fight. So I wonder if that's kind of the situation that's just going on here, that it went the way he really least wanted it to go. And he's not going to just, take it lightly.
Look, he's a guy that's not being used to being told what to do, or a guy that's
Yeah.
used to being bullied, right? You know, he doesn't have that money and own the clubs he owns without people jumping for him and with him winning all of these battles and everything else. But this is a guy that, since he's come to Nottingham Forest, has a history of throwing his toys out the pram. Broke financial fair play rules in a desperate attempt to stay in the Premier League. Accused the referee of being a Luton fan when a bad decision went against Forest. Banned Gary Neville from the City ground for daring to criticise him. Berated Nuno on the pitch despite him leading Forest to a top 7 finish. Grassed on Crystal Palace to UEFA to ban them from the Europa League next season.
Yeah.
And now the Morgan Gibbs-White thing. So I don't want anyone to sit here and say this is Tottenham's problem. This guy has a history of throwing his toys out the pram when people either criticize him or get one over on him. He does not like it, and that's why this whole situation has come around. But don't worry about it. I have a feeling this deal will get done. Daniel Levy's the exact same. Daniel Levy will not lose. He will not lose. We know this. You know, in negotiations, he likes to, when he's selling players, get every penny he can out of the selling club, out of the buying club and everything else. When he's buying players, he's constantly penny pinching to try and win that deal and get the best deal as well. So Daniel Levy will not back down, and out of principle, he will get Morgan Gibbs-White through the door just to keep his reputation alone, if anything.
When an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, in this case between Marinakis and the likes of Daniel Levy. Forgive my manners to Mark's show. Please, apologies. I meant to get to this much earlier.
Is this Cookie or the other Mark?
The Mark Army is very strong. We know that. Thank you for 18 months of support. Thanks to all the members. You guys have helped us out a ton, especially over the summer when things go quickly, but things are also a bit dry. Just being a member really does go a long way with us. So we really do appreciate it. And so many of you guys are reaching ridiculous milestones. So really do appreciate the longevity of support that you guys have given us. And he's just saying, big up the legends. Thank you, Mark. Really do appreciate you. And hopefully you're enjoying your Hotspur summer.
Hopefully you're recovering as well. If I'm correct, I think you were in hospital or something for a while. So hopefully you're feeling better now, Cookie.
Yeah, hang in there, Cookie. Appreciate you, my man. So Dave, I think you did give an answer to me, that you think it will get done, eventually at some stage. You're not that worried that it won't get done. You just think Daniel Levy is the sort of guy, he'll have his ducks in a row, he'll get it over the line.
Look, this guy is employing a typical hostage scenario. I'm going to hold you hostage and I'm going to get what I want. And he's going to try and negotiate to get more money. The people negotiating always end up winning. And that's what's going to happen. Daniel Levy will win this. Mark my words.
All right. Well, unless there are any people that want to interrupt the show at this point, we are going to get to our members' comments. Like I said, we're not going to make anything up for this show today. We're just going to talk everything Gibbs-White. We're going to go over to the post section, just bringing it up now so that we can answer some of these members' questions for you guys. Thank you to all the members. It is a perk, by the way, in case you weren't aware, in case maybe you're a recent member. For all of these panel shows, we try to reserve time at the end of the show to answer any of your guys' questions. I know Artist T is been saying there's one towards the end that he wanted us to answer.
They show up today. The last one still haven't shown up.
Yeah, there's a little bit of maybe a technical error on that case. But let's get to them. We have Donovan Osterreicher saying it's not really a but if Morgan Gibbs-White falls through. It might be a blessing in disguise because Eze is still available. Question, what is the panel's favorite dessert? I prefer nice ice cream with berries. Now, let's start first with the Eze situation. If you had the choice between Eze or Morgan Gibbs-White, Sam, who would you pick?
I don't know. Probably Eze. Although I could make the same argument I kind of have made about Gibbs-White in the past. That although I want Gibbs-White, I don't think that either of them is like the most crucial piece of the puzzle that we need right this second. I think they'll both be fantastic players for us. I think ultimately I'd probably take Eze because I feel like his versatility of playing left and central will just be more important. But I as I said, I'm very happy with Gibbs-White, but I don't think that either of them's the priority.
Okay. He wants Eze. Dave, if you had the choice between one or the other for Donovan's question?
Look, I've actually made no secret. I wanted both players at Tottenham and Kudus as well, So the fact I'm getting 2 out of 3 is absolutely brilliant. I feel like I'm going to be walking up, at some point and saying, Dave, you've been living in dreamland or in a coma for this long. You're back to reality now. Tottenham are 16th in the league doing shit and everything else. But Look, I would actually prefer Eze, and the reason why I say that is I think Eze will impact games more quickly at Tottenham than I think Morgan Gibbs-White would. I think Morgan Gibbs-White might take a little bit of time to find his feet. I think the difference for me is I think Morgan Gibbs-White is a better passer of the ball than maybe Eze. Eze is more of a player that can get on the ball, beat players, take them out of the game. When the ball comes to him, flick it around the corner first time rather than have to take a touch and get turned and pass it. And what I really like about Eze is I do watch England games. They're usually very, very boring. But the one player that comes in and brings that bit of unpredictability to their forward player is always Eze. Anytime he's come off the bench for England, I've really liked what he's added to that forward line. So for me, I would rather go after Eze, but I still love Morgan Gibbs-White. Don't worry, my man. I'm still all for him.
I think what's interesting about one or the other is that Eze could play in the forward line, in the front three, if there is going to be a front three under Thomas Frank. But then Morgan Gibbs-White is just all around, just a midfielder. But then he's more industrious than the likes of Eze. He's a guy who can get stuck in, but then also play that brilliant pass, like Dave is saying, that then can pop up with a goal, in a good situation as well. It's kind of more that all-around midfielder, whereas Eze is more of just a dynamic, really exciting, forward player that can play in the midfield, but is just very forward-minded and isn't maybe as industrial as I would say the likes of Gibbs-White is. Jimbo, thank you so much for the support, sir. Saying, hi, gents. It could only happen to Spurs. The window is looking like the best window for years. Now this has put a damper on it and has slowed us down. Some people really are thinking, this could be hindering other moves or slowing down Spurs. Maybe it's delayed it by a day or two, just this whole fiasco that they've had to, like maybe brought up before by Artist T. It's like we've had to delegate other resources to then have those guys, focus on the situation and then have the other departments still, look at the other targets we need to get over the line. But I mean, I don't know if it's really put a damper in the window for me yet, Jimbo. Maybe if we don't get the deal done, it might, but I at least think we're still kind of living off of the high, living off the positive that Spurs did have 60 million to trigger a release clause for, because that's just something we'd never seen us do before. And I think that's giving us a lot of optimism and a lot of hope.
I do understand what Jimbo means and what Jimbo is saying here, though, Jacko, because, let's be honest, it was dead for about a month and a half. All of a sudden, we had two really exciting days, Kudos and then Morgan Gibbs-White to follow. And, it seemed like, Morgan Gibbs-White to follow. We're probably going to get another win in over the weekend or early next week ahead of, the first friendly. And we're going to look a little bit different and we can get excited. It just feels like the Morgan Gibbs-White one has slowed down outcomings and incomings from Tottenham, at this moment in time. Even journals don't even know what to print anymore, Jack. Usually they're good at making up stuff like the Esteve links and stuff like that, but even they're not making them up because, it just seems like everybody's in limbo. No one actually knows what's going on or how this is going to be resolved. So I do understand what Jimbo was saying. It just feels like we were building up momentum in the window and it's all come crashing down thanks to Marinakos.
Yeah. Thank you, Jimbo, for the support, by the way. And thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. Hopefully you're enjoying your Hotspur Happy Clapper summer, my fellow Happy Clapper and Jimbo. And by the way, they're still close to now, and especially
nearly 1,000.
Nearly 1,000. I think it's almost split evenly between the likes of YouTube and on X or Twitter. So please, everybody, if you're on X or Twitter, follow us over to YouTube. Would love to have you over here. And if you are watching over on YouTube, smash the like button. I'm seeing only around 140 that have, and they're nearly 450 watching as we're wrapping up the show here. But let's go to just quickly Donovan's dessert question. Favorite dessert, Sam?
See, I thought you were going to skip this, and I was going to be as in like you'd forget about it. So I was going to make sure that we went back to it. I've been thinking about it in depth in the last couple minutes. I think if I had to, I want to give my podium finish. I think Death Row dessert, banoffee pie, unbelievable. Oh, yes. My granddad makes an unbelievable banoffee pie as well. So I'll have to be getting that when I nip out to Cyprus in September. I think you can't beat an ice cream. I think just any ice cream, it's a staple. It might not be the best ever, but I think that you can't beat that. And then also I'm a bit of a slut for a red velvet cake.
Wow. Oh, no. He's giving you a front three there of ice creams, or desserts, should I say, to pick from there. Donavision. I'm a huge ice cream guy. I'm very loyal to the Haagen-Dazs brand. I know we started out, showing our loyalty to Ben and Jerry's, but I'd like to think I've matured all of a sudden, I've, maybe developed more of a liking to the Haagen-Dazs, any of the Haagen-Dazs flavors I'm a big fan of.
Me, I've got 4 just quickly. I love banoffee pie with vanilla ice cream. Gotta have some scoop of vanilla with it. I'm with Sam on that. I'm all over that. Chocolate brownie as well with vanilla ice
Yeah,
cream.
I'm on
Can't
that.
beat it. Sticky toffee pudding as well. Can't beat that.
Fuck, I
But
forgot about
I'm
that.
gonna go old school, growing up classic, jelly and ice cream. Oh my god, you can't
Nah.
beat it.
Yeah, wow. No, wasn't expecting that one at the end there. I also am very, very big fan of rice pudding. I'm a big rice pudding guy. That's the only
Oh,
dessert where if I don't really normally like to get dessert, at a restaurant, just feel like it just adds to the bill. That's already usually pretty expensive. But
Mm.
anytime I see rice pudding, I'm a sucker for it. It's just one of those
oh,
things. I don't know how to make it at home. So it's one of those that like, well, if you see it someplace else and you don't know how to make it at home, usually not a bad idea to order it.
that
I'm
makes
kind
rice pudding. I may get the recipe off you.
I, I
Off them
feel
for you. Do you know what else I love as well? Just quickly, mixed berry crumble. Oh my god, that sends me tingling.
I tell you, just a quick honorable mention for its versatility. Custard as well. Feel like it gets about, mate. You can throw it on anything.
can play
Custard,
any
yeah,
position
yeah.
in the midfield. The custard could play any
Actually,
position.
trifle. Fucking unbelievable. Love a trifle.
Well done, Donovision. Definitely got the panel going on that one. Rain Man saying the rumors that Kudus asked Chelsea for a guarantee to play centrally. Other news is that Donley is going to be in the first team squad with Matters and Kulu, also central attacking midfielders. How does this panel think this will play out? I kind of mentioned that to Dave, I think today or another day was, and we'll probably talk about this on Thursday as well, Rain Man. So it's a great question. With all of the creative options that we have, how is Donley, supposed to be able to crack into the first team squad this season, Dave? You have Madison, Kulusevski, Kudus, potentially Gibbs-White as well. Like, we all love Jamie Donley and we want him to be kept around, but are there almost just too many of the same type of players, around?
What a problem to have. It's better than
Yeah.
having one option, and then some idiot coming off the bench. You can't fucking do anything. It's, at least we've got good players, deep, So if we suffer an injury, we're not going to suffer the same problems we did last season because the next guy's off the right. Look, I think out of them all, I think Donnelly has the biggest, the biggest job to try and prove to Thomas Frank. I think when you look at it, and if I'm Jamie Donnelly, I look at Kulusevski and Madison, coming back from their injury, probably going to be a bit slower coming back preseason. If I'm Jamie Donnelly, I've got to be in the shape of my life and ready to hit the ground running, straight off the bat, take my opportunities there. Don't play safe, play brave, produce some magic. Now, from my understanding, I think Thomas Frank is enjoying so far what he's seeing from Jamie Donnelly in training and stuff like that. And has been well rumored that Tottenham are going to keep him around for preseason and have a look at him. And I do think Jamie Donnelly is a player that would have benefited from playing with Leyton Orient men's football last season. And it's quite clear, despite many people saying to me, oh, Dave, you're just showing favoritism. Dave, he's not as good as you make it out to be. Now, every single fucking Spurs fan wants this guy to be given a chance. So, I was right all along with this guy. And it's clear that everybody can see the talent that this guy possesses now. The only thing for me is does he have the physicality to ready and go and produce at this level now after having that loan spell? Or is he going to need another one? I think that's a decision that will be made later on in preseason. As far as I'm aware, I think they've already had a whole host of offers from clubs trying to get Jamie Donnelly on loan, so they're not going to be short of clubs offering him to go there and stuff like that. But he's got the biggest job. I think Kulusevski, will be moved back out wide on one of the wide positions, personally, or potentially if Richarlison goes, could it be used up front as a striker? I know he played there twice for Ange and done a great job. Does Thomas Frank look at him that? I think Kulusevski, I don't think will be that player through this middle like he was under Ange Postecoglou. That's just my feeling.
Okay.
With Madison, it's going to be interesting. If bringing Morgan Gibbs-White, two of them competing for an England squad, is Madison going to take the gamble that potentially he loses his spot and has to sit on the bench and fill second fiddle? I'm not quite so sure. So I don't think that position is done yet. I still think there's a lot more movement in general in the players in them positions to happen.
Gotcha. I think we then have this one from Artist T. He wants everyone to answer this. I would like your thoughts on this. I place some blame on us in this situation. In hindsight, I can kind of see why it would raise some flags because the bid was right on the tee. Levy trying to save money caused this. I guarantee if we went over, Forrest wouldn't have been able to use the excuse of it being the exact amount. I get Forrest is trying to save face, but we gave them a reason to complain. Dave, you and I did speak about this earlier. Like, what if Spurs did bid let's say 68 million, 70 million, something like that, Forest technically would had to have accepted, right? But then also maybe there wouldn't have been as much, concern that, maybe Tottenham knew something they shouldn't have.
Um, look,
Did we do something wrong? Should we have bid 60 million and £1?
no. No, look, I think Arsenal done that for Luis Suarez years ago, didn't they? Was it a January transfer window? I think they tried it or something. Money that Luis Suarez didn't want to make the move. And in effect, I think they pissed off Liverpool when they made that bid as well, 60 million and £1. At the end of the day, you don't even have to stretch over. The release clause is 60 million. That's what we pay. Why would you pay any extra than what you have to? Especially if you're Daniel Levy. It's hard to get him to part with money at the best of times, let alone any extra. At the end of the day, if it's 60 million, you pay 60 million, it's triggered. We shouldn't have to give them a goodwill gesture or anything like that.
But Dave,
you wouldn't see clubs do that to us if we had release clause. No club would come in and go, oh, there's an extra 10 million, there's a goodwill gesture. We're not a fucking charity.
Could you argue, though, Dave, that they could have gone 55 million and then jumped to 60 when that 55 was rejected?
You see, my whole thing is I was listening to someone earlier on and they were speaking about that. I think Nottingham Forest were interested and they were quoted, or City were interested in Morgan Gibbs-White a while ago and they were quoted 8 million. It's just the case that Marinakos will sell if he gets the money he wants. But at the end of the day, we put the money on the release clause. There's no problem here from Tottenham. The only thing Tottenham have done wrong is negotiate with the player and agree whatever they've agreed before they went and triggered the release clause. At the end of the day, when it comes to the release clause itself, we've triggered it. There's no problem. There's never any problem when every other club goes and fucking does it. Why is that a problem? Why do we have to make this one Tottenham's fault? I'm absolutely fed up with this. This isn't Tottenham's fault. I've already listed out Marinakis' list of charges in the Premier League alone, let alone the other leagues that he owns clubs in. This is on him and him solely. Let's not forget, Roy Keane, he brought in Martin O'Neill as Nottingham Forest manager. Martin O'Neill wanted to bring in Roy Keane as his assistant. Roy Keane sat down in an interview with this guy and he said, this is what I'm looking for in my contract. You know what Marinakis turns around and said to him? Have you not earned enough money over your career? You know what I mean? Like, it's not Tottenham's fault. Yeah, this guy is an idiot. He's an idiot. It's not Tottenham's fault, and I blame Tottenham for a hell of a lot of my pain that I've suffered over my 33 years on this planet. I'm not going to fucking blame them for this. I've asked Tottenham to go and trigger a release clause. They've gone and done it.
Yeah, that's fair. And Marinakis just has a history of just being, a difficult
person. If Roy
person.
Keane thinks he's a see you next Tuesday, he's a see you next Tuesday.
He's probably hurt by Ange's sacking as well. He gave him an award the other day, didn't
he? Just quickly, Sam, because he did want everyone to answer it. Do you think Spurs messed up by not bidding like 64 million, something kind of cheeky like that, even if they did know the situation with the 60 million pound release clause? Or is this just
quickly, would any of you walk into a shop, see a chocolate bar at 150 and go to the shopkeeper, there's 180?
Do you know what's funny about this?
Is anyone going to
I'm the worst at haggling. Like I've noticed when you go to like a farmer's market or like what's a better example? Like there's that one in East London, that huge, open air market that people go to where you can sort of haggle and sort of like negotiate for the prices of something. Like it says it's £60, but you could say like, oh, would you take 50? And usually you kind of meet halfway in between there. I'm the worst. Usually I never even ask like one question. I'm like, yep, 60. All right, there you go. Take it. I wish I remembered to do that more often. But even when I do, I'm way too awkward about it. But Sam, I mean, where do you lie on this? Are you like with Dave, where it's just Marinakis being a bit of a dick, or should Spurs have been clever and done something like a 63, 64 million pound bid?
I think I lean more to Dave, but I also understand the logic. And as I was kind of saying before, like, I don't know why you wouldn't bid if there was a, because maybe they didn't even know this was secret. Maybe they were just told there's a sort of unknown release clause of 60 million, but maybe there wasn't like, oh, this is confidential, right? We just don't know. So ultimately, if they did know about it, then they could have been cheeky and bid 55 million and wasted a week getting up to 60 million, right? Just to play the game.
Yeah.
And look, maybe now in hindsight, having looked back on it, they if in the future they will do that if they hear about this kind of thing, then you're not paying over the odds. You're paying exactly what the release clause says, but you've basically danced the dance with Marinakis and sort of pandered to his ego without letting him think that he's getting taken for a ride, even if he's not happy with the release clause. Ultimately, the release clause is there and legally binding. So that, again, just to sort of, for the whole kind of argument of the debate show today, it's like, that is, if Gibbs-White wants to move, which we're led to believe he is, he's coming to Spurs. It's just a matter of when.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of
The answer,
yeah.
Just to throw one back at RST and to answer his question, if you walked into the Spurs shop and the Spurs jersey was 80 quid, are you going to go to Daniel Levy? There's 90 quid.
I think it's all, hindsight. It's like, oh, well, now that we are in this situation, what could Spurs have done? But it's like, well, you would usually assume that, like, you pay the release clause, the deal gets over the line, you have the personal terms agreed with the player. He's also ready to do a medical literally that day, the following day after it was sent in. Like, you feel like you've done everything right, technically, and you wouldn't expect the situation to arise. This situation almost never happens. And the only reason it is happening is because of Forest owner just being a stubborn guy and just someone that is kind of throwing his toys out the pram. So I guess maybe technically you could have thought, oh, what if there's a scenario where he, just acts like a dick and just doesn't, let this go through. But I think at the end of the day, you would assume that, okay, we paid the release clause, personal terms are agreed. We've done it how you're supposed to do it. And it just turns out that he just doesn't want to play by the rules, I guess, Marinakis, or he wants to just make this as difficult as possible.
He wants more money.
Maybe we knew that I don't know. It's just like, I guess that's, if you're dealing with this Forest owner, maybe there's a chance that this could happen, but it's absurd behavior. So I don't really know. I think
he wants more money out of the deal. That's why he's going to try and threaten to sue Tottenham. That's why he's threatening to, write all these things to the Premier League, because he's hoping one of them turn around to Tottenham and go, oh, you may cough him up more money. That's what he hopes. That's it. He's not getting more money.
And then lastly, to Artist T, when does Fantasy Premier League start? I would like to join. I think we get it started and kind of get it going about a week before the actual Premier League season begins, because, you can just make your team at any point. You just have your Fantasy Premier League account, and then we usually just send out the code, send out the link to all the members about a week before the season. If you want to participate in the draft league, we'll put out all the info for that as well. Artist T, Dave and I think we're the champions actually of that league, but we'll probably do that again just because we did a fun sort of Zoom call draft where everybody was just sort of having a beer, looking at each other's picks, making fun of each other. It was actually a really good time and was really enjoyable. So I think we'll do that again. So just look out for it in the post section. You'll know about it. You won't be able to miss it. We'll talk about it on certain streams, and we'll also put posts about it in the members section. So where's the fantasy update? That I have been lagging on. So apologies about that, Tyler. But yeah, we'll have that all posted about a week or so before the season begins. Maybe the draft league we might do a little bit sooner or something, just so that people can all make the timing for it. But I think that's our show for this evening, unless Dave, I'm missing anything.
No, just quickly, Stole Slide per game. He says, so Dave, what is preventing this happening? Look, I'm not an ITK. I'm not an insider. I don't have any insight on transfers. I just go off informations, of people that have history of dealing in transfer markets and the way they work and shit like that. But from my understanding is Marinakis hasn't given Morgan Gibbs-White the green light to go to Tottenham for the medical, and that's what's holding it up.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody for joining us for this stream. On your way out, please smash the like button. Thank you to all the support that we got from people like Artist T, Jimbo, the Two Marks Show. Really appreciate you guys going the extra mile and also just giving us extra things to talk about, because there wasn't a ton to talk about in the show. So I actually,
you done well to salvage a show today, Jack.
I think so. So everybody, hopefully you enjoyed it. A nice clean hour. And to anyone watching it back, hopefully you also are enjoying the program. We'll see you all Thursday for another panel show. We'll be doing that on mostly preseason info, preseason stuff, what to look forward to in the preseason, maybe what to be worried about, thinking about Thomas Frank, how he's going to be handling the preseason and all that stuff. So please join us for Thursday. Hope to see you all back with us. Thank you for all the support. So many people watching over on X. So if you are watching on X, follow us over to YouTube. We would really appreciate it. Yeah. But we'll see you all next time. Come on, you Spurs. And free Morgan Gibbs, Lily White, as King Hoddle has been saying in the chat. Free him, please. Let him out.